Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are here again in another webinar, in another delivery of our series. Um, it's been a really interesting month, if you want to call it that way. We have a lot to discuss this evening. You can leave your questions in the chat box. And we will answer them at the very end of the webinar. We're going to have like a discussion of a really important subject today. We are going to discuss the racial implications in multiple sclerosis. I know that we have had in the past many people asking us if there's any implications of race in MS, and is there anything that different ethnic groups should be doing to avoid a worse prognosis or a worse outcome. So I think it's even more so now. It's more relevant to have this discussion, and we're going to show you. We're going to give you a journey of what are the real racial implications in terms of multiple sclerosis, because there is something there that's really telling us that this could have a potential relation, and I will leave you with a lot of good details and also a lot of good resources. So at the very end of this presentation, you're gonna be able to go to those websites, to go to those agencies, to go to those places, so you can get more information and you can help us to improve and find answers actually in terms of multiple sclerosis and this potential implication in terms of race. So just to bring everybody up to speed, most of the things that I'm going to talk are associated with epidemiology, right? As you all know, and this is like some sort of disclaimer if you want to put it that way, multiple sclerosis, we don't really have a definitive answer as of today. We have been knowing this disease, and this is very humbling for all of us, because this disease has been there for approximately 2 centuries, and we still don't know yet what is the real cause. So over the years of this, the existence of this disease, we have come to find associations that could explain potentially, but no one that is definitive enough so we can tell this is the reason of why MS happens in population, or why people develop multiple sclerosis. So we have genetic predispositions. We have there is also this vitamin D type of theory. There is family predisposition. There is this theory about the latitude and the geographical distribution of MS, and specifically this one we're going to speak more in detail tonight are in regards of the epidemiology implications of MS that could potentially tell us a little bit more about racial, or how race those plays a role. So from the get-go, yes, there's definitely some things that are important to discuss in terms of, for example, is multiple sclerosis have a worse prognosis in African Americans? Those MS really is not so prevalent in Hispanic communities. And finally, is really MS a disease for just Caucasian people? So we'll have this discussion today, and we're gonna try to make it fun. Okay, there's a lot of historical details here that we're going to discuss, so just bear with me. That I promise you that at the end of this talk, we're gonna be able to have a lot of answers about this matter. So, MS and race. Again, my name is Dr. Serrano. I am the MS and Neuroimmunology Clinical and Research Fellow at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital, and I am talking from Washington, D.C., United States of America. So, multiple sclerosis right now. This is the chart with the latest data that we have in terms of MS. This is very important because previously, before this study was published in 2019, there was like some sort of hard numbers or like a pre-trial numbers that they were saying that it could potentially be around 450,000 or 500,000 people with multiple sclerosis living in the United States. Now we know that this is not the case. That there's more people than we thought that are struggling with multiple sclerosis as of today, and that number can come as up to 1 million people in the United States. So if you're seeing this webinar tonight, you're not alone struggling with this disease. And as we will be discussing this, these actually colors have a lot of meaning, but bear with me, I will show you what this actually means. And just to start with some historical numbers, in 1976, the estimate, it will be that 63% of the MS population would be female. But now, in 2017, the estimate is that 75% of the population with multiple sclerosis is going to be female. And this has very important implications in terms of the outcome of the disease and the prognosis of the disease. So, back in the history, okay? I told you, 200 years approximately that we have been dealing with this disease. It's puzzling, and it's puzzling because of the chart that I just showed you, that by 1922, a review at Davenport, one of the important scientists around that time, of 26 studies of multiple sclerosis, showed a consistent male predominance of 58% and female of 42%. This is actually really dramatic, as now we are seeing that there is a predisposition of more female rather than men. In the mid-century, around 1950s, Kurland and other scientists concluded that after reviewing the studies that the numbers of men and women were approximately equal. So by 1950, things started to gradually change. At present, we understand that the female to male ratio is approximately 2.5 to 3, and you can see it as an evidence of this chart right here. So from 10 people that you're going to see in the street, approximately 7 to 8 is going to be female. So what's the deal with this thing? And I'm showing you this chart as it will explain, why at first, from the epidemiology standpoint, okay, it was believed that multiple sclerosis was a disease of Caucasian people. If you can see that red line, okay, that's the Scandinavian American line. In the 1920s, this was a huge industry of people who were just traveling from all these Nordic countries right here, okay? All these countries right here that will be traveling to America over that line. And they just start to establish a community, a very important community. So if you can see here, all these are the Scandinavian countries. We're talking about Sweden, Norway, Finland. That's going to have very, very important implications. All of these countries were having travels to America, and they established in New York. And then from New York, they moved Midwest in the upper side or the upper states of the country. So it was believed that in 1920 they said, yeah, you know what, maybe because Swedes and Finns who were living in these high prevalence areas of multiple sclerosis, they were traveling to America, and they established in this portion of the country is that there was a correlation. And the ancestry of these people, these Scandinavian people, are mostly Caucasian. So This basically sent a message, or basically just paved the way to believe that this is a Caucasian only type of disease. And this is just for very interesting purposes. I found one of the pamphlets that they were using in this Scandinavian American lining. So this was a huge industry. So it was just not a few people who were traveling. It was just thousands of people. And the passenger list, even the menus from the food that they were taking at that time. I thought it was really interesting. It was really cool in terms of history, right? So since 1915s, it's been known that MS has this unusual geographical distribution. It increases with frequency in latitudes, both in the northern and southern hemispheres. So as you can see here, and this is why it's so interesting, right? These are the Scandinavian countries, right? European countries. And then you can see, how these follow a distribution, and goes in the parts of North America, Iceland, and also, in the south latitude, away from the hemispheres. You see, these are the hemispheres right here, away from those hemispheres. So that was fascinating, right? So that's if you read about it and you know about MS, as I know you do, this theory that because you're further away from the latitudes, there's lower levels of vitamin D. This could potentially be the explanation, but this is also very, very interesting, right? And this is very puzzling that, MS was so prevalent in this area, and then these people were just traveling here, and that's how the disease was actually moving towards parts of Canada and the United States. So in Europe, the incidence of MS was highest in Central European areas and lower both in North and South, but the highest rates have been recorded in the Shetland and Orkney Island off the coast of Scotland. So this is Scotland right here. You see that is a little bit more red than the rest. This is when the prevalence is a little bit higher in terms of multiple sclerosis. So European countries have even higher incidence and prevalence of multiple sclerosis. And because of these Scandinavian travels, they just basically giving a foundation that, what if MS has a lot to do with, not just migration by the word, because now that word tends to be a little bit, difficult or harsh, right? But in terms of migration, this means that this is a disease that is highly related with the human nature and the human contact, right? So maybe not exactly related with, exposition to sunlight and therefore vitamin D. There's also data that suggests that that's the case. But for the purpose, again, of this lecture, right, we're trying to find if there are racial implications of MS. And this is basically telling us, right, that, migration and the movement of people in and out, that human interaction, that human nature, basically tell us that, yeah, indeed, there could potentially be some implications here. So this geographical distribution, this previously known distribution, right, that is more common on the latitudes further away from the equators, has more to do with this Nordic ancestry and the migration. We're talking about Vikings, we're talking about these people. And Nordics, and as you can see in this map right here, they establish more often in these communities, right? The Scandinavian people, Norway, Sweden, we're talking about Finland, right? And then that migration towards this side of the country, could potentially have some relations. Why? Because we have noticed that the disease can be more, have more incidence and prevalence in Caucasian people. Now we're seeing it more often also in African Americans and Hispanics as well. But the incidence is just really, really low in Asian, the ancestry countries, right? So this basically is giving you some insights, that there can be implications in terms of this migration from one side to the other, and how this human interaction can play a successful role to say there is a link between this and quite frankly race in terms of multiple sclerosis. So again, if you see this map right here, okay, usually the countries that are in red, it means that they have higher cases per 100,000 people. And that's what we see, these Scandinavian countries, European countries, and how this migration, there is a huge association, right? There's not a lot of historic data that, from these Nordic countries, they travel to Central or South America. Hence, that's why we see very few cases here, right? And, quite frankly, in Africa, it's also really hard. And that's one of the messages that I want to leave here, right? Because we don't have enough data, right? The most of the data that we have so far is studies that we have done, in Caucasian people, because it was thought to believe, maybe because predisposition based on these data and these historical findings, that was the case. But the beauty of this is that we're here to learn, and try to just set the footprint that could say, okay, we used to think that this was just a Caucasian only type of disease, but we're seeing more cases in people. And if this is a disease that can be associated with people, right, and their movements, we can definitely set an impact in trying to shed light and see what other ethnicities are also affected by multiple sclerosis. So you may ask me, right? I mean, Edwin, yeah, it kind of makes sense. There's like compelling data that could be, but sounds a little bit there's some sort of a speculation there that could be the case. And I can say, yeah, that's fine. But there's one little piece of data in the history. You see this little thing right here in the middle of, this Nordic ancestry, the UK, European countries, in, the United States and North America. And that's the Faroe Islands. And there is this very, very interesting piece of data, historic data, that mentioned that by 1960, approximately 1960, there was an invasion from UK troops to the Faroe Island. Before that time, no cases of multiple sclerosis in the area. After that time, and just keep in mind that this is not a highly populated island, after the invasion of this by the UK troops, by British troops, and whatever it was in their baggage, they were starting to report approximately 25 cases of multiple sclerosis. So the Faroe Island, and then, by investigations by Krutke, he was able to find and do like an epidemiological pinpoint, where they basically said that yes, because of the migration of those troops in this area, we can conclude that those cases of multiple sclerosis in that zone are associated with that point migration in time, that epidemiological point. So whatever these humans had, either on their baggage or their bodies, was the causal agent of what happened in the Faroe Island. So some people say that, maybe this could have like an infectious type of component, right? But we really don't know that, right? What I'm trying to tell you here is that we have, some historical data that whatever happened in time, and whatever happened in terms of the migration, the exposure to different population or groups of people, that was explained what happened in the Faroe Islands. So there's definitely a human component in the human nature that could explain that it could have some racial implications, or probably not, but we'll see. So what are the implications in the US? Now that I have shown you all these maps, all these, kind of crazy things, if you bear with me until now, thank you so much. I know I give you just a history lesson. We just passed geography like years ago right? The least that we need is a lot of maps in there. But thank you for staying with me. So the potential implications is that if you see here, in the northeast portion of the United States, and in the Midwest, is where we have the highest prevalence in multiple sclerosis. Did I tell you that, there is history data that they were traveling from those Nordic ancestry countries to here, and then these people migrated from here? Lots of people with, Nordic ancestry are living in these countries right now. These portions of the countries in the Northeast and the Midwest. And if we trace a line here, please forgive my drawing, you can see how there even within the country, there's like very substantial differences in terms of incidence and prevalences of the disease. So this movement of people, that potentially could have brought the disease with them, established in these communities. And in these communities, minorities were not very prevalent. And that's why this could potentially lead to believe that, multiple sclerosis was a disease of Caucasians only people, right? But as you will see in a couple of slides, after these movements of people within the country, right? And this constant exchange between, minorities and Caucasians, and these exposures and this sharing, right? And this opening to different cultures, to different ethnic groups, things are having a different behavior right now. So, once again, as I said first, as you can see, the prevalence is increasing. It is not just affecting an ethnic group, but actually a gender. Because as at the beginning of this talk, right? In 1922, it was believed that MS had a higher prevalence in men rather than women. But now, decades after, we're just finding that that thing has reversed. And now it's female who have more prevalence than male. You can say probably those studies in 1922 were not that great at like assessing the entire pool of all the data that they had or the patients that they had, but it nonetheless it makes you wonder, right? Those shifts that has happened and how now, even in 1976 to now, this prevalence continues to lengthen, affecting more female than what they do on men. So let's finally talk about the elephant in the room, ethnicity. So ethnicity. Research has demonstrated that MS occurred in most ethnic groups, including African American, Asians, and Hispanic Latinos, but is more common amongst Caucasian of Northern European ancestry. So there is evidence there, that it's more prevalent in these groups, right? And the migration of these groups to a new country that is more widely cultured day by day, might be these interactions behind why we have so more cases opening in all these minority groups. And their susceptibility vary among these groups as well, with recent findings suggesting that African American women have a higher than previously reported risk of developing MS, and Hispanic Americans have a higher incidence of MS compared with their ancestral countries of origin. What does this mean? It means that if you're Hispanic from Central America and you were born there, and you are Hispanic who was born in the United States, you, just by being born in the United States, have a higher incidence or likelihood of developing MS than a Hispanic for the country of origin. So, this tells you, this gives you just pile up more in this evidence that, these human interactions, can have a big impact, in how the MS disease has developed. And although we don't have definitive answers this evidence is compelling enough. Now, multiple sclerosis in the African American community. Is there any implications? The answer is yes. There are different symptoms. There's some evidence that these MS symptoms can be different in severity in African American people. They can have more frequent relapses and poorer recovery. They can have more walking problems. African Americans can have more balance and coordination issues. They can have more cognitive deficits and problems with thinking. They can have an earlier disability onset, and they can have more visual symptoms. And the reason of why there is like more than 20 plus MS therapies available right now, it's because we want to prevent disability in these groups. So if you're an African American right now, we finally have some evidence that, the disease behaves a little bit different. So the problem that we have faced before, and I will talk a little bit more in detail, is that because this, historical belief, that MS was just a more common, it actually is more common. It was led to believe that it was just like a more Caucasian type of disease. And it was funny because even in med school, I heard some people come with this claim, right, that the MS was a disease more associated with Caucasian people. But we're now finally shedding light. We're now getting better at attracting our minorities and just being able to see, the depth of the disease in these communities. Multiple sclerosis in the Hispanic community. For a long time, healthcare professionals assumed that multiple sclerosis was uncommon in Hispanic and Latino populations. Recent studies are showing an increase in the number of people throughout Latin America who have MS. This figure is rising faster than the growth rate of that region's total population. This is still less than the incidence rate of Caucasians and African American population, but we're finding that also Hispanic communities are being affected by multiple sclerosis at a higher degree than we expected it to be. Now, everything, happens for a reason. When you believe or you're thought to believe that one disease is just associated with one group, it's harder to see other groups, right? And for what it's worth, minorities, and we know this, we all know this, minorities have, less access to healthcare. Minorities are less likely to have better outcomes, not just in healthcare, but in other areas, like financially, and things that, make hard for people for example, access to, a good paying insurance. There are people who have to pay higher copays, so people cannot, just being able to curb the copay cost of their healthcare. And that's why we're missing these people, not just in the African American, but Latino communities. Or minorities have been heavily impacted by this. In medicine, our goal is to, being able to connect with our minorities. We want to connect with the African American community. We want to connect with the Hispanic community. And being able to see as a MS specialist how the disease is behaving, and if you have like a wide difference. And we're starting to see things, especially in the African American community. And just so you know, even among the African American community, African American women tend to have a more severe disease. And all the things that I mentioned you in terms of the severity of symptoms tends to be even higher than expected in African American female than men. So we still have a lot of work to do, and we are not over. We're improving, we're moving forward. So the best thing we can do right now to improve the access to healthcare and to understand the disease, in different ethnic groups, is by us engaging with the community, and the community as well engaging in different programs that's going to help us put our minorities to have a better representation on different studies, so we can get more data and how the disease is behaving on them. So in that effort, I'm leaving you these 2 links and my email down there. The first email is the National MS Society. And the National MS Society had a staggering amount of information, not just about multiple sclerosis overall, but also how the disease and some data, how the disease is behaving in Caucasians and African American communities and also Hispanic communities. Why is this so important? And this is just so paramount. And why am I bringing these messages to you? It's because if we have more studies where we can, take more representation from African Americans and Hispanics, we're going to be able to see if the medications that we have approved now have a better outcome for these communities. If there's any medication out there that can have a better response in the African American community and the Hispanic community, we will be able to do a great service for them, for our patients. If we find by doing a study with some medications that there was one who had a better profile for Caucasians, or a better profile for Hispanics, or a better profile for African Americans, and we're able to give them these therapies, I can guarantee you that we have done a tremendous service for our communities. So I leave you the first link, that's the MS Society, open for each and every one of you who's watching this webinar. Our second link is the National African American MS Society, and that's a registry. When you, if you're African American, go to that website, you can join that registry, so they can actually make you part on different studies. So they can count you, and they can count on your disease, they can count on your symptoms, they can count on your outcomes. That way we're gonna be able to measure how the disease behave, but also what therapies can be better for you, more beneficial for you. And if there's any other findings, that can help the African American community. And finally, there's also my email. And I'm trying to do this effort of also building a registry for MS patients of Hispanic ancestry. So if you're a Hispanic out there and you're struggling with this disease, you're not alone. And that's my email right there. You can email me, we can connect. And as soon as I build this website, I'm gonna send to everyone so they can join, so we can have more representation. Please try to understand this. The more representation minorities have, the better we're going to be able to understand how the disease behave. And finally, ultimately, we're going to provide better outcomes for your disease. So I hope this lecture was helpful. And now we're going to start some of the Q&A sessions. Thank you so much. All right, very well. So let me go over some of the questions that we have right now. So is there any website we can go? Yeah, so the last slide that I introduced you was the slide about the MS Society, right? The African American Registry for Multiple Sclerosis, and finally my email. In fact, let me just pull that out, and I'm just gonna leave it there so you can just have more time to see it. So yeah, so nationalmssociety.org, NAAMSR, which is National African American MS Registry.org. And finally, there's my email right there, so you can have it and we can connect. I see another question about, is the disease worse in African American population. As again, the importance of being able to be able to count African Americans in different studies is so we can definitely give a definitive answer. That's the case. We are seeing, as I showed you in the previous slide, that symptoms tend to be worse, disability tends to be worse, the visual impairment, the cognitive impairment tends to be worse. So the faster that you are on the disease-modifying therapy or therapies to prevent the progression of multiple sclerosis, the better outcomes we might have, right? Next question, is there any specific therapy that is available? Now, non-specific therapies per se, but what I can tell you is that we have approximately more than 20 different therapies for multiple sclerosis that has been approved by the FDA. So this is something that is very important for you to also grasp from this lecture. Disease-modifying therapies are not made to make symptoms better. Disease-modifying therapies are made to prevent the progression of the disease, to stop the worsening of the disease. So the better, the more compliant with the medication a patient is, better outcomes. The faster that a person is on a disease-modifying therapy, better outcomes, right? But we don't want to wait until people start having relapses or starting to accrue disability until we start, disease-modifying therapy. So it's important for you to talk to your provider. If you're not having symptoms right now, then that's good. I mean, I've seen many people who say that they don't want to be in disease-modifying therapies. We cannot pressure you to be on any of those therapies. But we can definitely tell that being on a disease-modifying therapy improve your well-being in terms of having fewer relapses and also stopping the progression of the disease and the disability as well. Now, I hope that you all got the links in there. We're gonna come back here, okay? Some other of the questions of the audience is, can I email you about other related stuff in terms of multiple sclerosis? My email is there. I try to regularly check it, when I have a little bit of time in the middle of my duties, but definitely. If there's anything I can help you with, I'm more than happy to provide that help. I'm more than happy to connect with you and at least guide you of where you should go. Now here, I don't have health insurance. Is there any way I can get help? I'm Hispanic. So sadly, Hispanics, that's one of the things that usually struggle as other minorities, access to healthcare. And again, this is one of the important things that are there, that exist and that we need to address, right? Thank you for that question. I think that question is really, really important. I think there are avenues there for people, in terms of insurance. You can be on Medicare, Medicaid, depending on your situation, okay? I will also recommend that there's a lot of organizations out there. Even the National Multiple Sclerosis Society can be helpful. Finally, I have had good experiences with Catholic charities or any other charitable, organizations out there. So taking a look at that can also be very helpful for you. But hang in there. Just try to look for help, and if there's anything else, any other questions that you may have, there's my email in the chat box already. Put it there for you to be able to see it. Okay. In terms of COVID-19 vaccine, should we all get the vaccine? Okay. So in terms of vaccination, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society have give some specific guidelines. We agree that there are no contraindications for you to get the vaccine. There are some therapies, like in some infusion therapies that you should double check with your provider so he can give you a detailed schedule of when you should be getting your vaccine, right? But I will definitely encourage you at least to get in line for the vaccine, to just go to your health department website and just sign up for the vaccine. And then those little details in terms of any potential scheduling with your medications, just reach out to your provider. And this is a case by case. Every patient is different. Every patient has a different management. So definitely just reaching out to your provider for additional questions or concerns that you may have is also a very good idea. Okay, and thank you for the webinar. It was very helpful. Thank you so much for joining. I throw a lot of questions out there, like really historical data, but I think it was very important. As you can see, MS, you can basically make the case that it's a disease that is associated with the human nature, the human interaction, right? As other diseases as well, right? We're still trying to find the definitive cause, and we hope that at least by the end of our lifetime as providers, we're gonna be able to find answers, and so we can have a better control. We're already doing great steps. We're doing fairly better than we were doing 20 years ago, right? But we expect that we will find better answers for you. Okay, and more people saying thank you there. Thank you for watching our webinar. And then okay, I guess that's pretty much it. So please reach out to those registries, reach out to those websites, and sign up. If there's any study that becomes available for minorities, please sign up for it, right? Be part of it, right? Because your answers is going to give answers to other people who need light at this moment. So thank you again for joining me at this evening. It was a fantastic pleasure to be with you. And again, there's my email there. If you need anything, you can just reach out to me. You can let me know. I'm here for you. I'm here to help you out. And the next webinar is going to be 4 weeks from now. So I think that approximately the next Tuesday at the end of the month will be our next session. We have fantastic providers. We still have a lot of content to share with you. This is not over. So we'll meet again in approximately 4 weeks with another great episode of our webinar series. And until now, please stay safe. We're still not out of the woods. Wear your mask, do social distancing, and at some point when we are vaccinated and we reach some herd immunity, we will be able to see each other again. We will be able to hug each other again. We will be able to meet again. In the meantime, just hang in there, and we're here for you for anything you may need. You have a great night.